Today we're going to cover every interval in music, plus an extra one that keeps the theorists up at night, the phantom interval. So let's start with our universally accepted, non-controversial, child-friendly, government-approved intervals. We'll turn our attention to the phantom interval later on. So the first interval we're going to look at today is the perfect unison. This is two notes of exactly the same pitch and register, and this inverts into a perfect octave.
Let's start down here on C, and our perfect unison's also down here on C, and this flips into a perfect octave.
So now we have an augmented unison. This is enharmonically equivalent to a minor second interval, and you might hear it referred to as a chromatic semitone. And this flips, or inverts, into a diminished octave.
So we start down here on C, then go up an augmented unison to C sharp, and this flips into a diminished octave from C sharp to C, enharmonically equivalent to a major seventh.
So now we have a diminished second. This is enharmonically equivalent to a perfect unison, and it flips into an augmented seventh, which is enharmonically equivalent to a perfect octave. Now I must confess, I've never actually seen this before. I'm trying to think of ways you could see it. I suppose maybe in keys with a lot of sharps and a lot of flats, you might see it in a kind of modulatory passage or something like that. But I haven't ever come across it myself. If you have, please enlighten me in the comments section below. So now we're back in the real world with a minor second interval. Much more common. This is enharmonically equivalent to the augmented unison that we were looking at before, and this flips into a major seventh interval. And that's something you'll notice. Minor always flips into major, diminished always flips into augmented, and perfect always flips into perfect. And if you think about it, it makes sense. For instance, with minor, we're talking about a relatively small musical distance, and therefore a smaller portion of that overall octave is taken up, and we're going to need a major interval to pick up the difference.
So we start down here on C, then go up a minor second to D flat, and this flips into a major seventh interval from D flat to C.
Our next interval is another common one, the major second. That's the start of our major scale, a whole tone, and this flips into a minor seventh interval.
We start down here on C, then go up a major second to D, and this flips into a minor seventh interval from D to C.
So now we have an augmented second interval. This is enharmonically equivalent to a minor third interval, and it's the melodic interval at the top of the harmonic minor scale. In fact, it's the reason why there's a melodic minor scale, because that melodic interval was seen as a dissonance. This flips into a diminished seventh, and so you might well see this interval written harmonically as part of a diminished seventh chord.
We start down here on C, then go up an augmented second to D sharp, and this flips into a diminished seventh interval from D sharp to C, enharmonically equivalent to a major sixth.
So now we have another rare one, the diminished third. This is enharmonically equivalent to a major second, and it flips into an augmented sixth. And that's an important point, because the only time I've ever seen this interval is when it's written harmonically as part of an augmented sixth chord. If you can think of any other examples, please, like with the diminished second, just let me know in the comments section. So now we arrive at one of the main building blocks in all of music, the minor third interval. This is enharmonically equivalent to the augmented second interval we were just looking at, and it flips into a major sixth.
We start down here on C, then go up a minor third to E flat, and this flips into a major sixth interval from E flat to C.
And now we're on to another principal building block of music, the major third, and this flips into a minor sixth.
We start down here on C, then go up a major third to E, and this flips into a minor sixth interval from E to C.
Okay, so our next interval is another rare one, the augmented third. This is a semitone wider than a major third and is enharmonically equivalent to a perfect fourth. It flips into a diminished sixth, which is enharmonically equivalent to a perfect fifth. I've only ever come across the diminished sixth when looking at slash chords and the enharmonic spellings associated with them, so it's another rare one.
We start down here on C, then go up an augmented third to E sharp, and this flips into a diminished sixth interval from E sharp to C, enharmonically equivalent to a perfect fifth.
So now we're on to the diminished fourth. This is a very important interval as it's part of both the harmonic and melodic minor scales. It flips into an augmented fifth interval and is enharmonically equivalent to a major third, which is exactly why we can derive that altered dominant chord out of the altered scale from melodic minor. So it's a very important interval indeed. Let's start down here on C, then go up a diminished fourth to F flat, and this flips into an augmented fifth interval from F flat to C, enharmonically equivalent to a minor sixth. So now we're on to another hugely common interval, the perfect fourth. Again, this is one of the principal building blocks of music, and it flips into the perfect fifth, which is arguably an even more important building block of music. You'll see both of these, both harmonically and melodically, all the time. So let's start here on C, then go up a perfect fourth to F, and this flips into a perfect fifth interval from F to C. Okay, so lastly, we have an augmented fourth interval. If we were to carry on from this point, we'd simply end up repeating ourselves. This is a hugely important interval, and it sits at the exact halfway point of the octave, and it flips into a diminished fifth interval, which is an interval of exactly the same size. It's a hugely important interval because it is fundamental to the creation of tension in tonal music, being the main building block of dominant seventh chords and diminished chords. So we start down here on C, then go up an augmented fourth to F sharp, and this flips into a diminished fifth interval from F sharp to C, enharmonically equivalent to an augmented fourth itself. So here it is, the phantom interval. It's just an augmented octave. So why is this the phantom interval and not a normal interval? Because it cannot invert as it exceeds the octave. Some people say it does invert, they say it inverts into a diminished unison, but really this is another phantom interval. As yes, if we now measure from C sharp, we could see a move to C natural as a diminished unison, but really this interval cannot exist because the first rule of interval identification is that you always measure from the lowest note. So really we're just left with an augmented unison. So after all this, we might well ask ourselves, is the phantom interval an interval at all? But my friends, there is a question even more pertinent than whether systematic theorists are correct about intervals being abstract objects requiring only label transformations for ontological verification. And that question is, who cares?